some landscapes feel wrong the moment you see them. Not because they are fake, because they look too deliberate to be natural. A giant boulder balanced on a cliff edge, a mountain shaped like a human face. Perfect stone columns rising from the sea. Entire valleys filled with rocks that resemble mushrooms, serpents, whales, or giant marbles scattered across the desert. And the strangest part is that none of these formations were carved by people. Wind did this, water did this. Pressure, erosion, heat, ice, and time did this. Today, we're traveling across deserts, coastlines, jungles, mountains, and frozen wilderness to see the world's strangest rock formations that genuinely look unreal. A stone caught in motion, not carved into cliffs, melted. The wave curves through the desert in ribbons of red, orange, yellow, and cream. Bending across the sandstone like a frozen current. It sits in Coyote Butte's north, near the Arizona-Utah border, inside the Vermilion Cliffs region. But it doesn't make you feel like it's ordinary desert. It feels like the ground briefly became liquid, then hardened before it could settle. The formation is Navajo sandstone, created from Jurassic sand dunes roughly 190 million years ago. Dunes that were buried, compressed, and turned into rock. Then wind and water began cutting through them. Erosion exposed cross-bedded layers, creating the taffy-like stripes that make the surface look painted by hand. Iron oxide added the stronger colors. Water first carved the troughs. Wind continued the work. What remains is smooth, delicate, and strangely alive-looking. Golden Rock should have fallen centuries ago. A massive granite boulder sits on the edge of a mountain platform in Mondstadt, Myanmar. Balanced with so little contact that the mind immediately questions it. It leans over the valley, it hangs there, and somehow it stays. The boulder stands about 25 feet high, with a circumference around 50 feet. Gold leaf covers its surface, giving the rock a shining skin that changes with the light. A small pagoda rests on top, turning a geological oddity into one of Myanmar's most sacred places. The physical balance alone would make it strange, but the legend makes it feel almost supernatural. Buddhist tradition says the rock is held in place by a strand of Buddha's hair. Another story says it was chosen because it resembled a hermit's head. Danger, devotion, and gold gives the formation its unreal quality. Cleanly sliced. That is the first thing you notice. A sandstone formation in the Saudi desert stands split almost perfectly down the middle, with two massive halves separated by a straight vertical seam. The gap looks too clean, too deliberate, too much like a laser passed through it. The rock sits about 50 kilometers south of the Tamar Oasis, in a remote desert setting where emptiness makes the split even sharper. Each half also rests on its own small pedestal, so the illusion doubles. It looks cut open and balanced on legs too thin for the weight above. Scientifically, the split is explained as a natural joint or fracture in the sandstone. Wind erosion, chemical weathering, and sand abrasion shaped the lower sections over time. The southeastern face contains ancient petroglyphs, including horses and ibex. It feels less like a broken boulder and more like a puzzle left unfinished. Along the north coast of Northern Ireland, roughly 40,000 basalt columns locked together like pieces of a giant stone pavement. Most are hexagonal. Some have 4, 5, 7, or 8 sides, but from above, you feel that the pattern is too orderly for a coastline shaped by waves and storms. The formation began around 50 to 60 million years ago during ancient volcanic activity. Lava cooled, the rock contracted. Cracks spread through the basalt in repeating polygonal shapes, similar to drying mud. But here, the scale is monumental. Some columns reach about 39 feet high. Others step toward the sea, forming a natural staircase into the Atlantic. That is why legend filled the gaps before geology did. Irish mythology says Finn McCool built the Causeway to fight the Scottish giant the Nandanere. and before thousands of perfect stone columns, that story almost feels reasonable. Kjeragbolten is a rock trapped between emptiness. A 5 cubic meter glacial boulder sits wedged inside a mountain crevice in Norway, suspended nearly 984 meters above Lysefjorden. It is not the size that makes it unreal. It is the position. The boulder seems like it should drop straight through the gap. Instead, it remains locked between two cliff walls, high above one of Norway's most dramatic fjord landscapes. It was deposited during the last glaciation, around 50,000 BC. As glaciers melted and the land rebounded, the rock became jammed into its current place. Ice moved it, rock trapped it, time held it there. But seeing it is different. No visual comfort, just one smooth stone plug above almost 1,000 meters of open air. China's Danxia landscapes appear painted across the mountains. Bands of red, orange, yellow, maroon and green sweep over ridges and cliffs, making whole hillsides seem brushed with color instead of built from rock. The effect is strongest in places like Danxia in Gansu. Sparse vegetation leaves the stone exposed. Nothing hides the layers. The colors come from stacked sandstone and mineral deposits, including iron oxide and trace minerals. Around 80 million years ago, red sandstone and conglomerate were deposited by lakes and streams. Then tectonic uplift, faulting, weathering, and erosion raised and exposed the layers. What had once been horizontal sediment became tilted, folded, and cut into cliffs, ravines, towers, and ridges. Some Danxia landscapes resemble karst formations, but they are sandstone and conglomerate pseudokarst shaped by different rocks. After rain, the colors deepen. At sunset, the slopes glow. The mountains stop seeming like mountains. They become geology turned into stripes. Blue-white walls curve over the water of Lake General Carrera in Chilean Patagonia. The caves form chambers, tunnels, and cathedral-like openings inside a solid marble peninsula. The lake is glacial. The water is intensely blue. and the marble catches that color so well that the stone seems to glow. The caves were shaped by more than 6,000 years of waves washing against calcium carbonate. The process was slow, but it polished the walls into smooth, swirling surfaces. The curves feel too soft for stone, too fluid for a cave. Light changes everything here. Water level, season, and time of day shift the colors across the walls. White becomes blue. Blue becomes silver. Dark veins appear and disappear as the lake moves beneath the openings. The marble is described as 95% pure calcium carbonate. Some source material places it around 450 million years old. Ancient rock, moving water, a cave shaped by pressure, but seen as something delicate and luminous. It does not feel carved by force. It feels polished by patience. Naka Cave seems like stone trying to become skin. Inside Phulanka National Park in Buen Province, sandstone surfaces carry repeating scaly textures that resemble a giant petrified serpent. The resemblance is unnerving, not vague, not distant. The surface appears patterned, like overlapping reptile scales. One slab near the entrance has even been described as resembling a python's head. Geology gives one explanation. Temperature changes cause the sandstone to expand and contract, producing natural cracks known as sun cracks. Water erosion and mineral deposits later shaped the layered texture even further. But folklore gives the place a second life. The formation is tied to Naga serpent traditions in Thailand. Local legend connects the snake-like rock to King Welu, who was cursed to become a giant serpent-like being. The story fits the shape almost too well. A natural sandstone surface is one thing. A sandstone surface that resembles ancient serpent skin is something else entirely, and that makes the illusion harder to dismiss. Devil's Tower rises from Wyoming like a monument that forgot to explain itself. The huge grooved monolith stands above the Belfourche River, rising 867 feet from summit to base, and 1,267 feet The surrounding landscape is mostly sedimentary. Then this appears, a giant vertical mass with deep columns running down its sides. The tower is made of phonolite porphyry, an igneous rock intruded around 40.5 million years ago. As magma cooled, it contracted into polygonal columns. Most are hexagonal. Some are 4, 5, or 7-sided. Certain columns reach up to 20 feet wide and 600 feet tall. Rain, snow, ice, and erosion continue widening the cracks between them. At the base, broken columns show the tower was once wider. Native American legends explain the grooves as claw marks left by giant bears trying to climb the rock. The marks are not cracks, rather, they are the memory of pursuit. Sigiriya Rock emerges from Sri Lanka's jungle like a fortress built by the earth before humans ever touched it. The granite column stands about 180 meters high near Dambulla in the central province. It rises suddenly from low plains with steep sides and a flat summit made for legend. Geologically, Sigiriya is an inselberg. It formed from a hardened granite outcrop connected to the magma plug of a former volcano. But what gives you that unreal feeling isn't from geology alone. In the 5th century, King Kashyapa built a palace on top and turned the rock into a royal citadel. Stone became throne, mountain became fortress. The summit still holds palace ruins and cisterns cut into the rock. Below it are moats, walls, water gardens, boulder gardens, and terraced gardens. Halfway up, the Lion Gate once formed a massive lion entrance. The head has collapsed. The paws remain. A lion-shaped gateway, a palace lifted into the sky. This forest makes you ask, did every tree turn to limestone? In Yunnan province, tall karst formations rise from the ground like petrified trunks, swords, animals, and human figures. The illusion is so strong that the name feels literal. It is a forest, just not one that grows. The rocks are believed to be more than 270 million years old. During the Permian period, the area was a shallow sea where sandstone and limestone accumulated. Later uplift exposed those deposits, then wind, rain, running water, and groundwater began cutting the limestone. Fractures guided the flow of water, controlling the depth and direction of the maze. That is why the pillars feel organized, while still appearing wild. Some rise like stalagmites, others resemble blades, others look almost human from the right angle. Split. Apple Rock is almost too simple to be real. One granite boulder sits offshore in Tasman Bay. Shaped like a giant apple cut neatly in half. The split is so clean that it feels intentional. But the cleft formed naturally along a joint, a weak plane commonly found in granite. Rain, waves, and long-term weathering exploited that weakness until the boulder separated into two halves. The shape does the rest. Rounded edges create the fruit-like outline. The gap creates the slice. Together, they turn an ordinary offshore rock into something staged. The formation sits about 50 meters from the coast between Kaitariteri and Marahau, near New Zealand's South Island. Maori tradition says two gods broke the rock apart while fighting over it. It makes sense, because the boulder appears less eroded than divided. Not shattered, separated with purpose. Uluru does not need a strange shape to feel unreal. Its power comes from scale and isolation. A single sandstone monolith rises 348 meters above the flat desert in Australia's Northern Territory. Glowing red against open sky and empty land. Nothing nearby prepares you for it. No mountain chain, no gradual build-up. Just one immense body of stone, standing alone. Uluru is an inselberg, a resistant remnant surrounded by eroded lowlands. Much of its mass continues underground, making the visible rock feel like only the exposed top of something far larger. The sandstone formed around 550 million years ago. Later tectonic forces tilted its sedimentary layers nearly vertical, creating unusual ribs and streaks across the surface. Iron oxide gives the outer rock its red-brown color. Light changes that color throughout the day. At dawn and sunset, Uluru can glow fiery red. During heavy rain, waterfalls form across the monolith. The way it transforms is almost impossible in such a dry desert setting. Fingal's cave feels like a cathedral built by volcanic fire and ocean waves. The sea cave sits on the uninhabited island of Staffa in Scotland's Inner Hebrides. Its walls are formed entirely from hexagonally jointed basalt columns created by Paleocene lava flows around 60 million years ago. As lava cooled, it contracted, fractures formed, producing the same natural patterns seen at Giant's Causeway. But here, the ocean cut into the basalt and opened a chamber inside it. It makes the geometry feel architectural, like a ritual chamber carved by forces older than memory. In Mahabalipuram, Tamil Nadu, a massive granite boulder rests on a steep slope as if frozen moments before rolling downhill. Krishna's butterball stands about 20 feet high, measures around 16 feet wide, and weighs roughly 250 tons. Yet it balances on a tiny base atop a naturally eroded hill. The position feels impossible, not because the rock is tall, because the contact point looks absurdly small. The formation has reportedly remained stable for more than 1,200 years. Local legend says the Pallava king Narasimhavarman tried and failed to move it in the 7th century. In 1908, British Governor Arthur Havelock reportedly attempted to dislodge it with 7 elephants. The rock did not move. The modern nickname comes from Krishna's love of butter. Making the boulder feel like a giant divine lump dropped onto the earth. A huge boulder on a slope. A tiny point of contact. Why hasn't it fallen? The Bungle range does not look natural from the air. It looks manufactured. Hundreds of striped sandstone domes rise from the Kimberley landscape like giant beehives arranged across the earth by design instead of erosion. The formations sit inside Purnululu National Park in Western Australia. Some rise as high as 250 meters above the surrounding plains. Orange bands wrap around the domes, dark grey and black stripes cut across them horizontally. The contrast is so sharp that the hills resemble painted props from a science fiction film, but the colours are biological and geological. Iron and manganese oxidized within the sandstone to create the orange layers. Dark bands formed where cyanobacteria and algae grew on moisture-rich surfaces. The rocks themselves are ancient. Sedimentary layers from old seabeds and river systems were deposited roughly 275 to 350 million years ago. Then erosion began reshaping them. Rainfall carved narrow gorges. Desert winds sculpted the domes, and over immense stretches of time, the landscape turned into a maze of chasms, cliffs, lagoons, and striped stone towers. Scientists describe it as one of the world's finest sandstone cone karst landscapes. But even that sounds too clinical for something this strange. The place feels less like a mountain range and more like a hidden world buried inside Australia. And the scale makes it harder to process. Roughly 450 square kilometers of surreal stone geometry spread across the landscape. A place where even the shadows seem unnatural. Off the coast of Heimaey in Iceland's Westman Islands, a giant elephant appears to emerge from the ocean. Not a vague resemblance, not one of those formations where people force the comparison. This one genuinely looks like an elephant, lowering its trunk into the sea. The illusion is almost uncomfortable in how complete it feels. The basalt formation rises from rugged volcanic cliffs shaped by Iceland's violent geological history. Dark grey rock folds into wrinkles resembling elephant skin. The head curves naturally. The trunk extends downward toward the water. Even the texture feels alive. Volcanic activity tied to the Eldfell eruption helped shape the formation. Slow cooling lava created columnar basalt, forming hexagonal structures beneath the surface. Then thousands of years of Atlantic erosion refined the details. Caves formed, edges softened. And eventually, the cliff began resembling something biological instead of geological. The contrast adds even more to the illusion. Dark volcanic rock against vivid blue ocean, cold sea spray striking what appears to be the face of an animal frozen in stone. Some people compare it to an elephant. Others think it resembles some ancient sea creature surfacing from the cliffs. That uncertainty is part of why it works so well. The rock does not just resemble something familiar. It feels caught halfway between animal and landscape. The Lena Pillars stretch beside the Lena River, like the ruins of a dead civilization. For roughly 40 kilometers, giant stone towers rise above the Siberian wilderness in long, fractured walls. Some reach between 150 and 300 meters high. From a distance, they resemble petrified skyscrapers, or the remains of a fortress abandoned long before recorded history. The formations stand in the Sakha Republic of Eastern Siberia, one of the coldest inhabited regions on Earth, and the climate helped shape them. The rock began as marine sediments deposited in shallow seas more than 540 million years ago during the Cambrian period. Limestone, dolomite, shale, and marlstone slowly hardened into cliffs. Then Siberia itself began tearing them apart. Water seeped into fractures. Winter temperatures plunged toward minus 60 degrees Celsius. The water froze and expanded. Rock cracked vertically. Summer heat widened the damage. Over countless cycles, entire walls fractured into narrow towers. It's why the pillars look so sharp and skeletal. The surrounding environment intensifies the effect. Frozen riverbanks, taiga forests, white mist drifting between dark stone spires. During winter, the entire landscape stops looking earthly. It resembles the edge of another planet. And because the region is so remote, the formations feel strangely untouched, like something enormous hiding in silence beside the river. Karlu looks like somebody scattered giant red marbles across the Australian desert. Huge granite boulders sit balanced on top of one another in impossible positions. Some appear split perfectly in half. Others balance on tiny contact points that seem far too small for their weight. The formations lie in Australia's Northern Territory, inside a shallow desert valley, and some of the rocks rise as high as 12 meters. The granite itself is ancient, roughly 1.7 billion years old. Originally formed deep beneath Earth's crust before tectonic uplift and erosion exposed it to the surface. Then weathering changed everything. Heat expanded the rock during the day. Cold desert nights contracted it again. Over time, cracks deepened. Outer layers peeled away in sheets through spheroidal weathering. Rounding the boulders into near-perfect spheres, making them look strangely artificial. Rounded granite usually appears in rivers or coastlines, not sitting in giant red clusters across open desert. The colors make it even more surreal. bright orange-red stone against pale grasses and deep blue sky. At sunrise and sunset, the rocks almost glow. The site also carries deep spiritual meaning for several Aboriginal groups, including the Warramungu and Kaitetje peoples. Streaming stories describe the Devil Man, a range, dropping hair clusters across the land that became the boulders. And honestly, standing among them, that story feels less strange than the geology itself. Guatapé Rock rises from Colombia like a giant stone wall dropped into the countryside. A single granite dome towers more than 200 meters above the surrounding landscape in Antioquia. Its steep, smooth sides make it seem less like a mountain and more like one enormous object. The formation resisted erosion better than the surrounding bedrock, likely because it contained fewer fractures. Everything around it weathered down. The monolith stayed behind. Geologists estimate the rock is around 65 million years old. But the detail people remember most is not the stone itself. It is the staircase. A narrow, zigzagging stairway climbs through a crack in the rock with more than 700 steps. From far away, it resembles a giant stitched seam running up the side of the monolith. Like somebody tried to sew the mountain back together. The indigenous Tahami people once worshipped the rock and called it Mojara or Mujara. In 1954, 3 climbers officially scaled it over the course of 5 days, and one strange scar still remains on the surface. A massive unfinished G and U painted during a dispute between nearby towns. Somehow, it adds to the surrealness. A smooth, prehistoric stone dome. A staircase cut into a crack. Giant painted letters abandoned halfway through. It feels less like one landmark and more like several unrelated images forced into the same landscape. The Moeraki boulders look placed instead of formed. Huge grey stone spheres rest along Kikohe Beach on New Zealand's Otago coast as though somebody rolled them onto the sand one by one. Some are small, Others reach more than 2 meters wide. Most are nearly perfect spheres, and that perfection is what makes them unsettling. Natural rocks usually fracture into rough, unpredictable shapes. These resemble giant stone eggs or sealed artifacts exposed by the tide. The boulders are septarian concretions formed inside Paleocene seafloor mud. Layers of mud, silt and clay slowly hardened around central cores, while calcite cement strengthened the structures from within. Some of the largest may have taken more than 5 million years to fully develop. Then coastal erosion exposed them from surrounding mudstone cliffs. Many contain radiating cracks called septaria. Those cracks later filled with yellow and brown calcite. The patterns resemble turtle shells or ancient carvings spread across the surface. Maori legend describes the boulders as remnants from the wreck of the canoe Arituru, eel baskets, calabashes, food containers washed ashore after disaster, and the beach genuinely feels like debris from another age. Smooth spheres emerging from cliffs, half buried in wet sand, waiting for the tide to return. Pedra de Gávea rises above Rio de Janeiro like a giant watching the coastline. The granite and gneiss monolith stands roughly 844 meters above sea level near Tijuca Forest. And from certain angles, one side resembles a human face staring over the Atlantic. The resemblance is strong enough that people once believed it had been carved, but geologists say the face is simply pareidolia created through erosion. Wind, rain, and weathering gradually shaped the harder granite and softer gneiss into something the human brain interprets as familiar. Other markings once claimed as ancient inscriptions are also considered natural. Still, the illusion remains difficult to ignore, especially because of the scale. Pedra de Gávea is one of the world's highest coastal monoliths. Forest spreads below it, ocean surrounds it, and the massive stone dome rises above everything else, like the remains of a forgotten statue. The upper granite layer dates back roughly 450 million years. The lower gneiss is even older, around 600 million years old. Weathering carved cavities and etched marks into the mountain over immense periods of time. Portuguese sailors named it in 1502 after comparing its silhouette to a ship's topsail. And even now, the shape feels oddly deliberate, not built, not carved, but somehow arranged into something human enough to feel intentional. Balanced rock feels temporary. A giant sandstone boulder weighing more than 3,500 tons sits perched on a much narrower pedestal inside Arches National Park. The formation rises 128 feet high, and the balancing rock alone towers 55 feet above the base. The proportions feel wrong immediately. The upper mass looks too large, the pedestal too weak, like the entire structure should collapse under its own weight. But differential erosion created the illusion. The upper cap rock belongs to the harder, slick rock member of the Entrada Sandstone Formation. The pedestal beneath it consists of softer, dewy bridge rock that erodes faster over time. Everything weakens from below. The balancing stone survives above it, making it appear frozen at the exact moment before failure. A smaller nearby formation, called Chip Off the Old Block, already collapsed decades ago during the winter of 1975 to 1976. So the threat feels real, not hypothetical. The desert setting sharpens the image even more. Red sandstone, glowing beneath sunsets. Distant mountains beyond the formation. A massive boulder, balanced against open sky. You look at it and immediately start calculating weight, pressure, gravity, and how long the pedestal has left. The strange thing about these formations is not just how unusual they look. It's how many of them seem to imitate something alive. Faces, animals, waves, forests, eggs, even architecture. And yet most of them were shaped by processes so slow that entire civilizations came and went. While the rock was still changing. Maybe that is why these places stay in people's minds. They do not feel random, they feel intentional. If one of these formations genuinely caught you off guard, let us know which one in the comments. And if you enjoy documentaries about places that almost do not feel real, make sure to like and subscribe, because there are still a lot more strange places out there for us to explore.